All right, we are live. It says it's recording.
Awesome.
Awesome. So welcome to our last group meeting.
That's the last one?
Yeah, I think so. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so this week we are going to discuss a few things. The first thing that we are going to discuss is what is health literacy and why is it important? Does anyone want to take a stab at health literacy in a nutshell? And then maybe somebody else can talk about why it's important.
I can, or I guess I was going to say why it was important, but I can do health literacy in general. Basically, it's the ability to understand, like the lay people's ability to understand the public health jargon or just the medical jargon. Anyway, that's like the super layman's terms.
No, that's perfect.
Understanding basic health information.
Great. All right, very good. So why is that important?
Because without being able to understand it, you can't make the health changes that you need to.
Yeah, exactly. Does anybody else have any other thoughts?
Well, you might not understand what people are trying to tell you.
Right.
You don't
And
understand.
like if you're at a doctor's office and they suggest like, hey, you need to take such and such pill for this reason and keep taking it. Like for antibiotics, for example, a lot of people stop taking it as soon as they start feeling better. But really that causes a problem because it doesn't, you haven't done the full regimen, so they start getting antibiotic resistant
Infections.
things like that. And so they just need to understand like how to follow directions. Like that's one of the biggest reasons why there are so many medical problems, because the home care isn't great. Like after working in the ER, that's the doctor's biggest problems are. It's like, hey, like they're not going home and doing the things I tell them to do. And so that's causing a lot of tertiary problems.
Right. I know another big issue is cultural and language barriers. I see that firsthand. Like, for example, the office that I work in, my boss is Latino, and she's a second generation. Well, she's actually first generation American. So her mom came from Mexico, and her mom lives with her, and she's very fortunate to live with her because my boss speaks, she's bilingual. Oh my goodness, it's bilingual. Sorry, it's late in the day. Anyway, so she can go to her mom's doctor's appointments and make sure that she understands the instructions. But I know that's a huge issue, that language barrier.
Yeah, it really is. Also, sign language is a big thing too. Like at least in Southern California, like there's at least someone there that can speak Spanish, or we have something called Sericom phones where you can call people and the doctor can just talk into the phone. The person gets the translation of it in the other phone, and then they can communicate with their person like that. But with sign language, you can't really call someone for it.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah.
So we have like this weird VidCom thing, but it's pretty ineffective because, it's just not as needed.
Yeah.
It's almost like a one-way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also with that too, like with translations, you don't know how much is being lost in the translation unless you're bilingual.
Right.
When my son was on a mission, he was in Paraguay, and he would, on his P days, he would send me things in Spanish, but a different dialect of Spanish. And so even Google Translate didn't use the dialect, the Guarani dialect that, they were using. So I'd get these like encrypted messages, and I'm like, oh, I hope that was, so it
Not
was
sure what he meant.
Yeah. So it's important, obviously, to have the best type and the best forms of communication possible when discussing,
Right.
the healthcare,
Right.
But I mean, every field would be like that, it's just not our healthcare, but we're in healthcare. But I would think that literacy is, obviously extremely important across the board. So.
Right. I know the only other thing I wanted to touch on with that is the cultural aspect. I know there are it's not just a language barrier, but there are some cultures that they don't they don't believe in the same kind of medicine that we do. And so, or other things, just hygiene or whatever. And so that's something that we have to, yeah, what were you gonna say, Brad?
Oh, and then there's like Jehovah Witnesses that don't like accept blood donate.
Oh, right, exactly.
Right.
And I guess it's cultural, religious, but either way,
It is a
you
culture,
need to
yeah.
accommodate for, and
Yeah,
it's hard. Like you got to learn
right.
about it.
Well, that, and I think we have to be understanding and kind and not look down on people just because they don't believe the same way we do.
Right.
So, all right. Is anyone else on?
Their point of view.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Just trying to understand their, to be more of a cohesive environment instead of being angry that, okay, these certain nationalities are not immunizing their kids when they come to America. I'm not mad at that. I just want to understand why,
Yeah.
because I don't want to be angry because they are brought up on different, the importance or the non-importance of having it in their previous countries and then coming here. And then there's so many people that don't want a deimmunization. So that's a little, I dealt with that a lot when my son was younger, and especially in the elementary school the years.
Right.
So,
Right. And I would understand like someone coming from a different country why they wouldn't want it, just because they weren't taught about it.
Sure.
That's lack of knowledge. Whereas
right. Here
in America, they have the right of knowledge. They're just
Exactly.
ignoring it to accept a falsehood.
Exactly.
Well, I think actually here that they unfortunately subscribe to misinformation. So that's the problem here.
And they have this selective exposure effect where they only look up information that supports their
Right.
claims already.
Right.
Without trying to change it because for some prideful reason. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Good point. All right. Well, if everyone's okay, we'll move on to the next item for discussion, which is we're going to review the Shannon Weaver model's 7 key components. And wait, say that again.
I just want to make one more point too.
Okay, go ahead.
One of the interesting things in the reading was that it said that 14% of people were below average in their health.
Oh, in health literacy?
Yeah. Only 12% were proficient. So
Yeah.
like even the basic is still not proficient. Like people, like the majority, I guess that would be 86% of people don't speak it proficiently enough in order to understand it.
Right.
So
Right. So that's huge. I mean, you could design a health intervention just around health literacy.
Yeah. Sure.
So, good point. All right. Anyone else have any comments on health literacy? All right. Let's move on to the 7 components of the Shannon Weaver model. There are 6 of us, right?
Yes.
So, how about we each take one, and I don't mind doing. I'll do the first one and maybe the last one. How about that? So,
what was the reading for the Shannon Weaver?
say again.
Was the Shannon Weaver model in chapter 11?
Chapter 11.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to take a minute to pull it up, or?
Yeah, I'm gonna look at it right now. Sorry.
Okay. That's great. Well, while Brad is looking it up, I'm just going to start with the first component. And one thing about the Shannon Weaver model that was pointed out is that it's a very simple and linear model. So it doesn't account for feedback. But at least it's still a good place to start when you're talking about communication. So the first component talks about the sender, and that is just the person or the source of information to be communicated. It's in the book. It says this would be the initiator of communication. From a health communication perspective, the sender would be the individual, organization, or agency that originated a health message. So that's what the first component is. Does someone want to go ahead with the second one?
I can.
Okay.
It's encoding, and this is the way that the information is packaged for transmission. So it's the message and how they put it together. I mean, not the message, but to deliver it.
Right, how it's delivered, yeah. Very good.
Is that like media then? Like,
Yeah, it can be.
as in, like this is mailed to you, social media.
Well, wouldn't that be the channel? Like,
Yeah.
channel.
I have a hard time with encoding. Like, I didn't really,
Well,
I guess, understand it.
encoding is the language or the symbols that are used. So the encoding would be like the English language. Like if the message is sent in English or if the message is sent in Spanish. The book gives that example of the movie Wind Talkers, where the military used the Navajo language
Yeah.
to transmit. Yeah. So that's what encoding is like the language, I think, is probably the simplest way to.
Could it also be like if there was a group of teenagers and they were texting back and forth like BRB, LOL, like it would be.
Oh,
like,
right.
I don't know. That's just the principle that I probably understand the least, and I left blank on the assignment up to this point because I just don't understand it very well.
So it's not the channel communication then. It's just
No.
Yeah, we're not.
Just the language.
just taking an idea and translating that into
layman's terms. Yeah.
language to the message, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just how the message is put into language or symbols. So like the
Okay.
symbols, well, kind of like what Susanna explained with the texting. You know how teenagers abbreviate, well, that kind of thing. That's a symbol, not really a language, but that is a way of encoding a message.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so how I guess we can relate this to the case study pretty well. Not the case study, but the activity that you had us where we drew our bugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is my bug.
Cool.
Oh, looky there.
This is my bug. Kind of proud of it. Anyways,
You should turn that in.
Let's see. Okay.
so basically, the sender would be the professor at this point. He encodes what he sees, right? Like, so he sees the bug how it's supposed to be.
He sees his version of the bug, right?
Well,
So he encodes it
yeah.
into the directions, and then the message is actually like the words on the text that I read, and then decoding is how I interpret that and put it
Right. The encoding is going to be the language that he uses, and then the message is also language, but it's the actual,
like the physical
it's the
text,
sentences and that kind of thing.
the thing that can be interpreted in different ways.
Right.
Okay.
All right. So who would like to talk about message?
I'll do that one. So it says here, the package of information, message is the package of information to be communicated. This really refers to the content of what is being communicated. So in reference to the bug, I'm taking the bug drawing, I'm thinking about what information. Okay, we were to use three long legs and three short legs and one long leg on the left side, on the right side, something like that.
Right.
That would be the information of how he was communicating the instructions to us. Do you see it? Is that the same?
Yeah.
So in this way, it says in the instructions, it can be simple or complex. And in this case, with the bug, I think that was pretty simple, but it would be interesting to see how everybody else, not that we need to show it, but,
Right.
I'd be curious to see if other people's, but,
I was just thrilled that mine looked somewhat like.
Mine too.
Yeah, I know, because
mine didn't have the angles to it, but they were not too bad, so I was happy. So I felt like I understood the message that was communicated, and the communication was via writing. So
right. All right, excellent. Okay, who wants to describe the channel?
I can.
Okay.
Well, we kind of talked about it before, but channel is just like the way that it was addressed. So in the texting and driving video, which I know we'll probably talk about in a minute, but it's like a video PSA. But if you do a social media post, social media is the channel, so on and so forth.
Exactly.
Radio.
Very good. All right. Decoding.
I can do decoding.
All right.
So the way the reading put it is the way the message is unpackaged following transmission. So I guess the way how we interpret it, I guess that's pretty much it. The way the message reflects in our opinion, the way we understand it, what's expected of us. And I guess that bug thing was a perfect example because we all probably understood it different ways. Even though the directions were the same, each of us had a established notion of what it means to do something a certain way.
Exactly. Like, for example, I noticed on his drawing, his wings were like really small on the body, and my wings, I made them completely covering the body, so it didn't leave me enough room to put the spots. So yeah, that's exactly a very good example.
Spiders don't have wings. That's like, it was weird.
Yeah.
Don't be so specific.
At 8 legs, it's a spider.
Yeah, exactly. Come on.
So I'll do receiver then.
Okay.
It just says the person or target audience of the information communicated. So I guess this is just the person that you want to help change their health behavior, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the audience that you're trying to write to.
Right, exactly. So we were the audience of the bug, trying to learn how to draw a bug.
Right, and based on your audience, it depends on how you should write, the message anyways, right? So if you're talking to teenagers, you're going to try and make it hip and trendy. So if you're talking to business professionals, you're going to be like trying to use the biggest words you can and make it very concise and
exactly.
Right, to the audience, yeah.
Right.
I think that it could even be like not the audience, but because audience and receiver doesn't have to be the same thing. I mean, it's hopefully is because you create the video with somebody in mind or a population in mind. But if it's for pregnant women, then if my husband sees it, he's not a pregnant woman. So it's not gonna, but he would receive it and he would look at it and decode it his own way, but he's not the target audience, but he's still the receiver.
Right.
True.
And then when he decodes it, then he might re-encode it for you, make a message, and you can decode it from that.
Exactly. And then we're just playing a game of telephone.
Yeah.
Exactly. Various levels. That's probably why.
Decoding to recoding. Yeah.
So that brings us conveniently to noise. Yeah. So I'll talk about noise. It's anything that interferes with the message that's being communicated. It can be anything from, literal noise in the background to you being hungry or tired or anything really that takes your mind off of or away from that message.
I think your personality could be noise too. Just like some people are just closed-minded to new ideas,
That's a good point. Yeah. I hadn't thought of that.
I like how it says hungry can be noise as well.
I really related to that one for some reason.
I'm hungry. So I got
Food.
Made me reflect back a lot through like military training because the first like 3 days we didn't sleep, and they tell you to do something and they never explain it. They just tell you to do it, and then while you're trying to figure it out, they'll surround you and keep yelling at you while you're trying to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. It was like a 180-degree change from the MTC versus this.
Wow.
That was so different. But anyway, there was definitely some noise. And so you keep messing up, and then they yell at you for messing up, and you're like, what do you want from me?
Wow.
So, but I think also with this and reflecting on it too, I feel like people can be trained to filter out noise as they get accustomed to hearing it, especially when it comes to things that stop people from like working out or dieting or something like that. Because I think, for example, hunger is a huge thing that gets people who are trying to kick a craving or something like that.
Right.
Learning how to tune that out and overcome that and just focus on what you're trying to do.
That's a very, very good point. So that could be the focus again of, health belief model, one of the components of an intervention. I really like that.
I react differently. I may get the same message, but on different days, or I may interpret it differently.
Yeah.
Maybe based on how much sleep I've had, based on how my day at work was, how my home life, something like that. So whatever a message is, my noise could be how I, my own or my
Your frame of mind.
My frame of mind that day, or even in that moment. I could be ticked because I just got cut off and almost hit on the way home, and so that could change my direction or just my thoughts or something. I'm like, dang, but
Yeah.
and other times I could perceive the same information a different way. So
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been awesome discussion. Does anyone have anything else they want to talk about before we move on to the video?
I just have one more question about encoding, because when
Okay.
I did the assignment, the way the information is packaged. So I watched a video on, well, it was like a commercial for autism awareness. And it was kind of a cartoony type of thing where did you watch that one, Susanna?
No.
No.
I saw it in one of my classes in health communications. We were shown it a couple times. I think it's a cute little video.
Yeah. And so that to me, that's what I put as how it was packaged, as a cartoon or living through the eyes of this kid. So is that not right? That's not really
I think that would be, this is how anyway, like through this conversation, this is kind of how I've, I guess, re-understood encoding, is that like the sender is me giving you a gift as the receiver, and how I encode it is like the wrapping paper I use. So I use blue stripe, I use polka dotted, I use Christmas paper. And so I guess like how they wrapped the message. And so I think that would definitely be, I guess with that context, because the message is like autism awareness, that's the gift inside, but they wrapped it in that like kind of cartoony kind of an autistic child perspective.
Well, and also encoding talks about using symbols. So the symbol was this cartoony character. So that applies as well.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, I just didn't know if I was totally off on that or not.
I don't think so.
Okay.
All right. Let me go back to my agenda. So now we're going to talk about. Okay. So did everyone watch the video? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're going to evaluate the public service announcement and discuss the components, as well as a message. So let's just talk about that.
well, the message was pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Death can or even the disfigurement, that was pretty powerful, and it makes you, and I thought about my internal, how much am I involved in this kind of thing, so kind of turn it introspectively for me as well.
I liked how it, had everybody stop and kind of like, I don't know how you describe that, but it was almost like a not slow motion, but where they were stopped and actually having this conversation about, what's going to happen, but here that it still happened.
Yeah.
How did you guys internalize that? Did that work for you?
It's interesting because I saw one a long time ago that was really, really like graphic. It was put out by some British company. I remember my mom showed it to me when I was in high school. And that hit me a lot harder than this one because of how like shocking it was. Mm-hmm. And I think that's interesting going back to maybe that's decoding, but like how each of us break down things differently. Like some people would react a lot more powerfully to this one as opposed to say maybe one that's more graphic. And so I think that goes, we kind of talked about this, how all of us, based on how we, I don't know, maybe grew up or preconceived again notions that we have, kind of decoded this differently, and it made us think, like for me, I thought it would be pretty selfish of me to have been that person texting while I'm driving. I mean, I'm sure we've all texted and driven before. I know I've done it. And so that was the thought I had. I was like, man, it's kind of selfish, I guess, to do that, because you're not thinking about the person you might be endangering. You typically only think of endangering yourself.
Right. That's a good point. Any other thoughts on, here, I'm going back to my agenda. What about the components of the Shannon Weaver model can we apply? Obviously I'm not sure who the sender was.
Public
The government.
safety. something or
Yeah, Public Safety Council or whatever.
Oh yeah. Well, I think one of the decoding aspects was like what Luke said, was like what you get from it. I think certain messages are more powerful because when you decode it, that's when you find out that's when you start relating to things.
Hmm.
So you lost a friend in a texting and driving accident, or like that day you had almost like you were texting, you're like, oh man, like that was dumb, you know? So I think that's when you find relatability, and that's when it starts convincing you to change.
Kind of like getting a close call. You know what I mean? Like you may have been doing it and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, I a close call while doing something like that. So
Yeah. Well, and I think the decoding, like both Luke and Brad pointed out, the decoding will depend on the receiver. You know, whoever is receiving it will decode it, you know, in their own way. And like the example that Luke gave, it may not be as impactful for person A as it is for person B. So, was there any kind of noise? Oh, go ahead.
I was just thinking about another encoding aspect that could be like, I can't remember if any of you have taken health communications already, as you're creating different things, they like talk about, they don't ever call it encoding, but this is kind of how I'm thinking of it, is I guess the emotion, like in there, I think it's emotional. I think it's an emotional, and that, like the part where the mom's like, please, my babies are in here. That part like hits me. And so I think like that's another way it can be packaged, or the encoding is with emotion or with fear, or with anger, stuff like different things like that. So I think that could be an aspect of encoding, is the emotion that accompanies it.
Yeah. So, and in fact, who knows, maybe this particular announcement, the target audience might have been mothers with children, you know, because we tend to appeal more to that emotion, whereas, you know, people who like I keep bringing up Luke, his example, but I thought that was a good example, you know, where the graphic PSA was more, you know, had more impact than say this one did, because it was a different audience.
maybe Luke, were you were a younger driver then too?
Yeah, I was like 16 when she showed that to me.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it was a little bit more impactful. You're a new driver, and that can, and maybe it'd be still impactful now. I'm not taking away from that, but it's just interesting being as a new driver, a little bit more aware of things and trying a little harder. Not that we're not as experienced drivers, but yeah, that's pretty.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like when I first started driving, I was just terrified the whole time. Like my eyes were just wide open, my head was on a swivel and everything. And now it's just something that's automatic. So I think, this would probably be more impactful for younger drivers, because one of the fears is that, they crash and they get hurt and then they damage their car. But now they have to add on top of it, I could hurt someone else too, you know, like they don't want to be that person with that kind of baggage.
Yeah. So what kind of noise did anyone experience when they watched?
Like getting a text could be distracting too.
Yeah.
They're doing it.
The other noise I could think of in regards to the PSA, like if somebody was watching this, because I think an example of noise was, what did it say here? Things that distract the person. So I was thinking, I don't know if this counts, but pride. Like if you're watching this and you're like, well, I'm a good driver, so I know I can text and I'll be okay. Like no one's gonna get hurt. I wonder if that could be classified as noise.
Or
Yeah,
if you
that
want to driving, I mean, that would be noise too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think noise is anything that affects the way you receive the message.
Yeah. I don't think it has anything to do with the message or the sender. I think it's just the environment that when we see it, you know.
And that's internal or external. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because it says that it's what interferes with the message, not like something that enhances it or something. So if it's a previous experience that is like, yeah, that's right, like I got in an accident because somebody was texting and driving, I think that would be something that enhances, so I wouldn't call that noise. But if it's that pride or something else, then that interferes with the way that the message should be received.
Yeah.
Good point. All right. So how did the message change behavior? I don't know if that's meant for, has it changed our behavior, or I don't know, whatever you guys think that's supposed to mean.
I mean, it convinces people to stop texting and driving. Maybe not everyone it touches, but if there's like, let's say 20% of people stop texting and driving, that'd be pretty great margins.
Yeah. Okay, this is off topic. I just got a note saying that my free meeting is going to end in like 4 minutes.
Yeah,
Is that-
I have the same thing, remaining meeting time.
Yeah,
I'm
and
not
it
sure.
does for sure.
I don't know. I've never seen that.
I've never seen it.
I never
either.
saw it before, so.
Did you put a
Okay.
setting like we'll end in 45 minutes?
Well, it says
Okay, it
4
can be done.
minutes.
Okay.
What
I
now?
wonder if that's why you couldn't save it to the cloud. I mean, I didn't pay for mine either, but I did it through my school email. So I don't know if that changes. That made a difference.
Maybe. Oh, it's so irritating. Okay, well,
Finish in 4 minutes.
yeah. So shall we finish in 4 minutes? Sorry, guys.
On the top of it, it does say 40-minute meeting, like at the very top of the
Yeah.
web browser.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's already specified.
So if
All
this
right.
goes over, do we lose it?
Yeah, I don't want to lose it. So let's just real quick review the application assignment. Does anyone have any questions about the assignment?
It just looks like look at 3 different messages, identify all 7 parts.
Right.
The Ad Council website has some really good ones.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I
The opioid videos are intense. If anybody wants to look at them, they're kind of intense.
Okay. Did anyone find
That was
any?
in my drug class, my drug abuse class? Yeah, they're those opioids.
Yeah, I did the opioid one too. Did anyone find any radio ones? Because I've seen the still shot, the static ones, and I did TV, but I haven't found radio yet.
I found there was a radio one under the high blood pressure
Yeah,
on the
that's
Ad
the one I
Council
did.
page.
Okay,
Yeah.
on the Ad Council. Okay.
Hypertension, I think, or high blood
Hypertension.
pressure. Yeah, something.
Going on my Spotify account about meth all the time. And it makes me want to listen to meth.
You can also just look them up online, like on YouTube. Even though it's a radio message, they'll still come up as.
They'll still play.
Mhm.
Okay.
But there are several on the Ad Council.
All right. Well, we have 2 minutes left. Does anyone have any other questions or anything else that they wanted to bring up?
I don't think so. But we gotta hurry.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys. I'm sorry. This is exactly why I did not volunteer to be a group leader in the beginning.
Sorry.
Doing great. Thank you very much for volunteering.
All right. So thank you guys. And I will let you know when I get this all uploaded.
Sounds
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.